The morning sun cast long shadows across the alien research station as Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped off the transport shuttle. Her boots clicked against the metal platform, each step echoing in the vast hangar bay. She had traveled 18 light-years to reach this place, drawn by reports that seemed too incredible to believe. "Welcome to Station Kepler 442b, said Commander Torres, a weathered man with cybernetic implants along his jaw. "I hope you're ready for something that will challenge everything you think you know about interspecies relations." Elena adjusted her recording equipment and followed Torres through the station's corridors. The walls were lined with viewing panels showing the planet's surface below, a world where 50 different alien species had been brought together for the most ambitious xenobiology project in human history. Each species represented a different evolutionary path, from crystalline beings that fed on radiation to gaseous entities that could phase through solid matter. "The project started 5 years ago," Torres explained as they walked. "We gathered representatives from every known intelligent species in this galaxy sector. The goal was to study their behaviors, their technologies, their cultures. What we discovered was that keeping them all in one place was challenging." Through the viewing panels, Elena could see massive enclosures spread across the planet's surface. Each one was designed to accommodate the specific needs of different species. The Vortac needed temperatures that could melt steel. The crystalline collective required complete darkness and electromagnetic fields. The aquatic symbionts needed pressurized water environments that would crush most other life forms. "How do you manage the conflicts?" Elena asked, making notes on her tablet. "Surely some of these species have natural hostilities toward each other." Torres stopped walking and turned to face her. His expression was serious, almost reverent. "That's why you're here, Dr. Vasquez. There's someone you need to meet. Someone who changed everything about how these creatures interact with each other and with us." They entered an elevator that descended toward the planet's surface. Through the transparent walls, Elena watched as they passed through clouds and emerged over a landscape unlike anything she had ever seen. The alien enclosures were connected by a network of bridges and tunnels, creating a vast city designed for beings that had never been meant to coexist. "His name is Marcus Chen," Torres continued. "Former xenobiologist, but that doesn't begin to describe what he's become. When he arrived here 3 years ago, we were losing control of the entire project. The creatures were becoming increasingly aggressive, some were refusing to eat, others were attempting to escape or harm our research teams." The elevator touched down at a central hub station. Through the windows, Elena could see creatures moving about their enclosures with what appeared to be purpose and coordination. A massive reptilian being with 6 arms was carefully tending to some kind of garden. Nearby, floating jellyfish-like entities were creating intricate patterns in the air that seemed to pulse with their own light. "Where is he now?" Elena asked. "Probably making his rounds," Torres said. "He walks among them every day. All 50 species. They respond to him in ways that our teams of experts never achieved in years of trying." They exited the elevator and began walking along one of the main pathways. Elena immediately noticed how clean everything was, how organized. There were no signs of the chaos or conflict she had expected from housing 50 different alien species in one location. "Dr. Vasquez," called a voice from behind them. Elena turned to see a man approaching. He was perhaps 40 years old, with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, a plain shirt, and walking boots that had seen considerable use. There was nothing particularly remarkable about his appearance, yet something about his presence made Elena feel immediately at ease. "Marcus Chen," he said, extending his hand. "Commander Torres told me you were coming to document our work here." Elena shook his hand, studying his face for any sign of what made him so special. "Dr. Vasquez from the Xenological Institute. I have to admit, the reports about your success here seemed almost impossible to believe." Marcus smiled. "I understand the skepticism. Would you like to see for yourself?" He gestured toward a path that led deeper into the complex. As they walked, Elena noticed that other researchers and staff members they passed all nodded respectfully to Marcus. More than that, they seemed genuinely glad to see him, as if his presence alone made their work easier. The key, Marcus said as they approached the first enclosure, isn't control. It's understanding. Each of these species has evolved unique ways of communicating, of establishing trust, of showing respect. Most humans try to impose our own social structures on them. That's where the problems begin. They stopped in front of a massive transparent barrier. Beyond it, Elena could see what appeared to be a small group of beings that looked like walking trees, their bark like skin shifting colors as they moved. According to her briefing materials, these were the dendrites, a species that communicated through chemical signals and had been completely non-responsive to human contact. Marcus approached a control panel and input a series of commands. A section of the barrier retracted, creating an opening large enough for a person to step through. Dr. Vasquez, I really don't think, Torres began, but Marcus raised a gentle hand. It's fine, Marcus said. They know I'm coming. Elena watched in amazement as Marcus stepped through the opening and into the dendrite enclosure. The tree-like beings immediately began moving toward him, their bark shifting to display patterns of deep blue and gold. They surrounded him, but not aggressively. Instead, they seemed to be greeting him. Marcus stood still among them, and Elena realized he was breathing differently, taking slow, deep breaths through his nose. After a moment, his own skin began to show a faint blue tinge, as if he was somehow mimicking their chemical communication. The largest dendrite, easily 12 feet tall, approached Marcus directly. Its bark shifted to display intricate patterns that pulsed with soft light. Marcus nodded as if understanding, then reached into his pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a small vial of liquid. He poured a few drops onto the ground near the creature's root-like feet. The effect was immediate. All the dendrites began displaying brilliant patterns of gold and white, their bark shifting so rapidly that Elena could barely follow the changes. They were clearly expressing some form of joy or gratitude. Marcus spent several more minutes with them, moving slowly among the group. Each dendrite he approached responded with the same colorful display. Finally, he made his way back to the opening in the barrier. Nutrients from their home world, he explained as the barrier sealed behind him. They've been slowly depleting their reserves. The compound I gave them helps them process the artificial nutrients we provide, but it takes time to synthesize. How did you learn their chemical language? Elena asked, still amazed by what she had witnessed. Patience, Marcus replied. And the willingness to let them teach me instead of trying to force them to learn ours. They continued their tour, visiting enclosure after enclosure. At each one, Elena witnessed something that challenged her understanding of interspecies communication. Marcus interacted with floating gas-based entities by modulating his breathing to create specific pressure patterns. He communicated with crystalline beings by using a small device that generated precise electromagnetic frequencies. With aquatic species, he had learned to create subtle water current patterns using his movements. The Vorthak were the most challenging, Marcus said as they approached an enclosure filled with what appeared to be living lava. The heat radiating from the barrier was intense even from several feet away. They're basically sentient molten rock. Traditional communication methods are useless. Marcus activated controls that opened a heat-shielded communication chamber. Elena watched as he entered the chamber and activated systems that raised the internal temperature to levels that should have killed him instantly. Instead, he seemed comfortable, even relaxed. Through the heat-distorted view, Elena could see massive shapes moving in the molten environment beyond. They approached the chamber, and Marcus began making specific movements with his arms, not random gestures, but precise, rhythmic patterns that seemed almost like a dance. The Vorthak responded by creating patterns in their molten forms, synchronizing their movements with Marcus's gestures. Elena realized she was witnessing a conversation conducted entirely through choreographed motion, adapted to beings made of living fire. When Marcus emerged from the heat chamber, Elena was full of questions. How is that even possible? The temperature alone should have modified environmental suit, Marcus explained, showing her a thin, almost invisible layer beneath his clothes. But, more importantly, they understand that I'm willing to enter their environment to meet them on their terms. That gesture of respect means everything to them. As the day progressed, Elena documented interaction after interaction that seemed impossible. Marcus communicated with hive mind insects through complex pheromone patterns he created using specialized equipment. He spoke with energy-based beings by modulating electromagnetic fields around his body. With predatory species that had been considered too dangerous for human contact, he established trust through displays of controlled vulnerability that somehow convinced them he was not prey. The reports mentioned that all 50 species respond to you, Elena said as they took a break in the central observation deck. But, I'm seeing something more than just communication. They seem to genuinely respect you, almost defer to you. Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out over the complex where all 50 alien species lived in apparent harmony. Respect is earned through consistency, he said finally. Every day for 3 years, I've visited each group. I've learned their languages, their customs, their needs. When they're sick, I help heal them. When they're distressed, I work to solve their problems. When they have conflicts with each other, I mediate. But, how do you mediate between species that might not even recognize each other as intelligent life? By establishing myself as a constant, Marcus replied. I'm the one factor that all 50 species share. They may not understand each other, but they all understand me. That creates a bridge between them. Elena looked out over the enclosures again, seeing them with new understanding. The careful positioning of the different habitats, the connecting pathways, the way some species had clear sightlines to others, it wasn't random. It was designed to create awareness and familiarity between species that had never coexisted before. You've created a community, she realized. They created it, Marcus corrected. I just helped them realize it was possible. As the artificial sun began to set over the alien landscape, Elena watched creatures from dozens of different worlds settling into their evening routines. But, instead of the isolation she had expected, she saw interaction. Bioluminescent signals passing between different enclosures. Electromagnetic pulses that seemed to carry messages. Sound patterns that echoed from one habitat to another. The 50 species were talking to each other. Tomorrow, Marcus said, I'll show you something that I think will truly surprise you. Something that happened just last month that even I didn't think was possible. Elena packed away her recording equipment, her mind racing with implications. Everything she had witnessed challenged fundamental assumptions about interspecies relations, about communication, about the very nature of intelligence itself. As they walked back toward the elevator that would take them to the orbital station, Elena noticed that the path was lined with viewing windows from various enclosures. And, at each window, alien faces were pressed against the transparent barriers, watching Marcus as he passed. They weren't just observing him. They were saying goodnight. Elena woke before dawn, her mind still processing everything she had witnessed the previous day. Through her quarter's viewport, she could see the alien complex below, illuminated by bioluminescent patterns from various enclosures. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, the creatures were active, their communications creating a light show across the landscape. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Marcus's voice came through the communication system. Dr. Vasquez, if you're awake, you might want to see the morning feeding cycle. Meet me at Transport Bay 3 in 20 minutes. Elena quickly dressed and made her way through the station's corridors. She found Marcus waiting by a small transport vehicle loaded with various containers and equipment. He looked as calm and composed as he had the day before, but there was something in his expression that suggested anticipation. Good morning, he said. I hope you're ready for something unprecedented. What you saw yesterday was just the foundation. Today, I want to show you what we've built on top of it. They descended to the planet's surface in the transport, but this time Marcus directed them to an area Elena hadn't seen before, a large, circular clearing surrounded by viewing platforms and monitoring equipment. As they approached, Elena could see movement in the various enclosures that bordered the clearing. We call this the assembly ground, Marcus explained as they exited the transport. 6 months ago, the creatures started showing interest in what was happening in other enclosures. They began positioning themselves where they could observe each other during my visits. Elena looked around the clearing and realized that every single enclosure had a clear view of the central area. 50 different species could watch whatever happened here from the safety and comfort of their own environments. Last month, Marcus continued, something extraordinary happened. The Meridian Collective, the hive-mind insect species, began exhibiting signs of distress. Their queen was dying, and, without her, the entire colony would collapse within days. Marcus began setting up equipment in the center of the clearing, each device carefully positioned and calibrated. Elena recognized some of the communication tools from the previous day: electromagnetic field generators, chemical dispensers, sound modulators, heat projectors. The problem, Marcus said as he worked, was that saving the Meridian Queen required a substance that only exists naturally on their homeworld. We didn't have it, couldn't synthesize it fast enough, and couldn't get a supply shipment in time. As Marcus continued his preparations, Elena began to notice movement in the surrounding enclosures. The creatures were positioning themselves at their viewing barriers, all facing the assembly ground. It was as if they were gathering for some kind of event. That's when something unprecedented happened, Marcus said. The crystalline collective approached their barrier and began generating specific electromagnetic patterns. At first, I thought they were just curious about the distress signals from the Meridians. Marcus activated one of his communication devices, and, immediately, patterns of light began flowing through the crystalline being's enclosure. Elena could see the living crystal structures responding, their forms shifting and brightening in complex sequences. But, then, I realized what they were actually doing, Marcus continued. They were offering to help. Elena stared at the crystalline beings in amazement. They understood that another species was in danger? More than that. They had the solution. Marcus explained how the crystalline collective, beings of living mineral who processed electromagnetic radiation for sustenance, could transmute certain elements within their own bodies. They could create the exact compound needed to save the Meridian Queen, but only if they understood precisely what was required. The challenge was communication between two species that had completely different sensory modalities. The Meridians communicate through pheromones and touch. The crystallines use electromagnetic patterns. They had no common language except you, Elena realized. Marcus nodded. I became a living translator. The Meridians would describe their queen's condition through chemical signals, which I would interpret and, then, convert into electromagnetic patterns for the crystallines. The crystallines would respond with their proposed solutions, which I would translate back into chemical language for the Meridians. As if responding to some unseen cue, both the Meridian and crystalline enclosures became active. Elena could see the insect-like Meridians clustering around their viewing barrier, their antennae twitching with rapid movements. In the adjacent enclosure, the crystal beings were pulsing with soft light, their formations constantly shifting. But that was just the beginning, Marcus said. Other species began observing the interaction. The Vorthak, the molten rock beings, started generating heat patterns that indicated interest. The aquatic symbionts began creating water current messages. Within hours, I had 12 different species all trying to contribute to solving the Meridians' crisis. Marcus began activating multiple communication systems simultaneously. Elena watched in fascination as he started conducting what could only be described as an interspecies orchestra. He would receive a chemical message from the Meridians, translate it into electromagnetic patterns for the crystallines, convert their response into heat signatures for the Vorthak, and then translate the Vorthak's thermal input into pressure waves for the aquatic species. Each species had different insights, Marcus explained as he worked. The Vorthak understood mineral composition at a molecular level because of their geological nature. The aquatic symbionts knew about biological chemistry because of their symbiotic relationships. The dendrites had knowledge of organic compounds from their plant-like biology. Elena documented everything, but she found herself struggling to keep up with the complexity of what she was witnessing. Marcus was simultaneously managing communication protocols for a dozen different species, each with completely alien forms of language and thought processes. Yet somehow, he was making them all work together toward a common goal. The breakthrough came when the ethereal nomads joined the conversation, Marcus said, gesturing toward an enclosure that appeared to be empty but shimmered with barely visible distortions in the air. They exist partially outside normal spacetime, which gives them a unique perspective on quantum chemistry. They suggested a combination approach that none of the other species had considered. Elena watched as Marcus activated a device that generated subtle gravitational fluctuations. The air in the ethereal enclosure began to swirl in complex patterns, indicating the presence of the nearly invisible beings. Their response was translated through gravitational sensors into information that Marcus could interpret. The final solution required contributions from 7 different species, Marcus continued. The crystallines would transmute base elements provided by the Vorthack, using a process refined by suggestions from the aquatic symbionts, enhanced by organic catalysts identified by the dendrites, and stabilized using quantum principles explained by the ethereal nomads. As Marcus spoke, Elena began to understand the true magnitude of what had occurred. 7 completely alien species, with no common language or shared evolutionary background, had worked together to solve a complex biochemical problem that human science couldn't address. How long did this process take? Elena asked. 18 hours of continuous translation and coordination, Marcus replied. By the end, I had 43 of the 50 species monitoring the situation and offering input. Even species that couldn't directly contribute were relaying information and providing emotional support in their own ways. Marcus gestured toward a section of the meridian enclosure where Elena could see the distinctive dome-shaped structure that housed their queen. The treatment worked. The Meridian Queen recovered completely, and their colony not only survived but became stronger than ever. But the real breakthrough, Marcus continued, was what happened afterward. The species had discovered that they could work together. They had seen the benefits of cooperation and shared knowledge. They wanted to continue the collaboration. Elena looked around the assembly ground with new understanding. This wasn't just a communication center. It was the birthplace of the first truly intergalactic civilization. Now they request regular assembly sessions, Marcus explained. Not for crisis management, but for knowledge sharing, problem solving, and what I can only describe as scientific collaboration. The crystallines have taught the Vorthack new ways to manipulate mineral structures. The aquatic symbionts have shared biological insights that help the dendrites optimize their nutrient processing. The ethereal nomads have provided spatial awareness concepts that revolutionized how several species understand their own enclosure designs. Marcus began activating the full array of communication systems. All around the assembly ground, the 50 enclosures came alive with activity. Elena realized she was about to witness one of these collaborative sessions. Today's topic, Marcus said, is habitat optimization. Several species have proposed modifications to their enclosures based on insights they've gained from observing other species' environments. But they want to discuss the ideas collectively before implementation. What followed was unlike anything Elena had ever imagined possible. Through Marcus's translation, she listened to a conversation between 50 different alien species, each contributing their unique perspective to problems of environmental design and resource management. The gas-based entities suggested pressure dynamics that could improve air circulation in solid matter environments. The silicon-based life forms proposed crystalline structures that could enhance energy distribution in organic habitats. Species that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously offered spatial concepts that could maximize living area within fixed boundaries. Dr. Vasquez, Marcus said during a brief pause in the translations, what you're witnessing is the birth of something completely new in galactic history. These species aren't just coexisting anymore. They're evolving together, sharing knowledge and perspectives across biological barriers that were thought to be impossible to bridge. Elena documented the session for over 4 hours, watching as species after species contributed ideas that were then refined and improved by insights from completely different forms of life. The collaboration was so sophisticated that solutions emerged which no single species, including humans, could have developed alone. There's something else, Marcus said as the session began to wind down. Something I haven't shown the Research Council yet because I'm not sure they're ready for it. He led Elena to a new section of the complex she hadn't seen before. As they walked, Elena noticed that the environment around them was subtly different. The air felt different, the lighting seemed more natural, and the very architecture of the corridors had an organic quality that was unlike the sterile research facility design of the main station. The species have begun designing improvements not just for their own enclosures, but for the human areas as well, Marcus explained. They've identified ways to optimize our life support systems, improve our psychological well-being through environmental modifications, and enhance our technological systems using principles they've discovered. They entered a new habitat area that took Elena's breath away. The space was clearly designed for human occupation, but it incorporated design elements she had never seen before. The walls had a crystalline structure that provided perfect lighting without any visible power source. The air moved in gentle currents that felt refreshing and energizing. The floor had a subtle texture that seemed to provide perfect traction while remaining comfortable to walk on. This is just the prototype, Marcus said. They want to redesign the entire station using collaborative principles. Not just the alien habitats, but the human areas too. They see us as part of their community now. Elena realized the profound implications of what Marcus was showing her. The 50 alien species weren't just tolerating human presence or even accepting it. They were actively working to improve human living conditions because they considered humans to be part of their collective civilization. How did you make this happen? Elena asked, still amazed by everything she had witnessed over the past 2 days. Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out over the assembly ground where the communication session was concluding. All 50 species were still visible at their viewing barriers, their various forms of acknowledgement creating a symphony of light, sound, and movement. I stopped trying to control them, he said finally. I started serving them instead. Once they understood that I was genuinely committed to their well-being, not just human research goals, everything changed. Trust, once established across species barriers, becomes the foundation for civilization. As they walked back toward the transport, Elena reflected on the transformation she had witnessed. A research project that had been on the verge of failure had become something unprecedented in galactic history. And, at the center of it all was one human being who had discovered that leadership across species barriers required not dominance, but service. 3 days into her visit, Elena was beginning to understand that everything she thought she knew about interspecies relations was fundamentally wrong. But nothing had prepared her for what Marcus showed her on the third morning. Dr. Vasquez, Marcus said as they met in the transport bay, today I want to show you something that even I find difficult to believe, despite being part of it. The species have developed something that goes beyond cooperation or collaboration. They've created what I can only describe as a collective intelligence. Elena secured her recording equipment as they descended to the planet's surface. The early morning light revealed activity in the enclosures that seemed different from what she had observed before. Rather than individual species going about their separate routines, there appeared to be coordinated movement across multiple habitats. It started 6 weeks ago, Marcus explained as they approached a new section of the complex Elena hadn't seen before. The species began synchronizing their daily activities. Not just during assembly sessions, but throughout their normal routines. They were sharing information constantly, in real time. The area Marcus led her to was unlike anything Elena had seen on the station. Instead of separate enclosures connected by viewing windows, this section consisted of interconnected habitats that flowed seamlessly from one environment to another. The barriers between species areas were selective membranes rather than solid walls, allowing for controlled interaction while maintaining necessary environmental conditions. How is this possible? Elena asked, studying the complex environmental transitions. These species have completely incompatible atmospheric and temperature requirements. They solved that problem themselves, Marcus replied. The crystalline collective developed selective energy barriers that maintain environmental integrity while allowing specific types of communication to pass through. The ethereal nomads contributed spatial distortion techniques that create buffer zones between incompatible environments. The aquatic symbionts designed fluid medium exchanges that allow chemical communication across atmospheric boundaries. As they walked through the interconnected complex, Elena began to understand the true scope of what had been accomplished. Each habitat was perfectly designed for its resident species, yet all 50 environments were linked by communication pathways that allowed real-time information exchange. The breakthrough came when they realized that their different sensory modalities weren't barriers to overcome, but tools to be combined, Marcus explained. The crystallines can perceive electromagnetic spectra that other species can't detect. The Vortac can sense molecular compositions through thermal analysis. The ethereals can observe quantum probability states. When they started sharing these different types of sensory data, they created a collective awareness that exceeded the capabilities of any individual species. Elena paused at an observation platform that overlooked the entire interconnected complex. From this vantage point, she could see all 50 species engaged in activities that were clearly coordinated across the entire community. The movements weren't random or even just cooperative, they were purposeful and directed, like components of a vast living machine. They're all working on the same project, Elena realized. Marcus nodded. Yesterday they presented me with something that I'm still trying to fully understand. They call it the Synthesis Protocol. It's a comprehensive plan for advancing the development of all 50 species simultaneously, plus humanity. Marcus activated a holographic display that projected above the observation platform. Elena found herself looking at what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of technological and biological development paths. The complexity was staggering: hundreds of interconnected research trajectories, resource allocation strategies, and collaborative development timelines. Each species contributes their unique capabilities to accelerate the advancement of all other species, Marcus explained. The crystallines provide energy manipulation technologies. The Vortac offer molecular engineering capabilities. The aquatic symbionts contribute biological adaptation techniques. The ethereals share spatial-temporal insights. And so on, for all 50 species. Elena studied the projection, trying to comprehend the scope of what she was seeing. This is a complete technological revolution. The advancement rate would be exponential compared to any single species developing alone. That's just the beginning, Marcus said. Look at the biological integration components. The holographic display shifted to show biological development paths. Elena saw genetic modification techniques that could enhance the capabilities of every species without altering their fundamental nature. Environmental adaptation protocols that would allow species to thrive in previously impossible conditions. Sensory augmentation methods that would give each species access to the full range of perceptual capabilities demonstrated by all other species. They're planning to create hybrid capabilities, Elena breathed. Not changing what they are, but expanding what they can become. And they want humanity to be part of it, Marcus added. They've identified specific enhancement protocols that could give humans access to capabilities we've never imagined. Enhanced electromagnetic sensitivity from crystalline integration. Thermal molecular analysis from Vortac collaboration. Symbiotic biological adaptation from the aquatic species. Spatial temporal awareness from the ethereals. Elena stared at the projections in amazement. The implications were staggering. Not just for the 50 species currently in the complex, but for the future of intelligence itself throughout the galaxy. How do they plan to implement this? Elena asked. That's what I want to show you today, Marcus replied. They've already begun the first phase. Marcus led Elena deeper into the interconnected complex, to an area she realized was completely new construction. The architecture here was unlike anything she had seen. It incorporated design elements from all 50 species, creating spaces that were simultaneously functional for radically different forms of life. They built this in 6 weeks, Marcus explained. Working together, using techniques and materials contributed by every species. It's the first truly universal habitat and environment that can accommodate any known form of intelligent life. Elena walked through corridors that seamlessly transitioned between crystalline formations, metallic structures, organic growth patterns, and energy field matrices. The lighting adapted automatically to optimal levels for whatever species might be present. The atmosphere adjusted its composition based on biological needs. The temperature, pressure, and electromagnetic fields all modulated in real time to create comfortable conditions for any inhabitant. This is impossible, Elena murmured. The computational requirements alone to manage all these environmental variables simultaneously would be impossible for any single species, Marcus agreed. But not for a collective intelligence that includes computational beings like the silicon processors, energy manipulation experts like the crystallins, and quantum probability calculators like the ethereals. They're processing environmental data and adjustments in real time using capabilities that no individual species possesses. They entered a large central chamber where Elena could see representatives from multiple species moving freely in the same space. A crystalline being was working alongside a Vorthak, their radically different environmental needs somehow being accommodated simultaneously. Aquatic symbionts were floating in specialized fluid spheres while communicating with airborne gas entities. Terrestrial species were interacting with energy-based life forms through sophisticated interface systems. How are they maintaining life support for such diverse biological requirements in the same space? Elena asked. Personal environmental fields, Marcus explained. Each individual carries a localized environment that maintains their biological needs while allowing them to exist in a shared space. The technology was developed collaboratively using insights from 17 different species. Elena watched in fascination as the mixed group of species worked together on what appeared to be a complex technological project. She could see devices and structures that incorporated design principles she didn't recognize, using materials and energy sources that seemed to defy conventional physics. What are they building? The next phase, Marcus replied. A communication and transportation system that will allow them to extend their collective intelligence beyond this planet. They want to make contact with species throughout the galaxy and invite them to join the collaborative network. Elena realized she was looking at the prototype for the galaxy's first truly interspecies civilization. Not a federation or alliance, but a genuine collective intelligence that incorporated the unique capabilities of every participant species while preserving their individual natures. The transmission system uses quantum entanglement principles provided by the ethereals, powered by energy manipulation techniques from the crystallines, guided by probability calculations from the silicon processors, and enhanced by biological neural networking concepts from the symbiotic species, Marcus explained. It can instantaneously communicate across galactic distances while maintaining the full complexity of multi-species collaborative intelligence. As if responding to their conversation, several of the species working in the central chamber turned toward Elena and Marcus. A crystalline being began generating light patterns that Elena recognized as a greeting. A Vorthak created thermal signals that felt welcoming. An aquatic creature in its mobility sphere pulsed with bioluminescent displays of acknowledgement. They know you're documenting their work, Marcus said. They want you to understand what they're offering to humanity and to every other intelligent species in the galaxy. Elena activated her recording equipment and began documenting the mixed species work session. What she captured was unprecedented beings with completely incompatible biology and radically different cognitive processes working together with perfect coordination on projects that exceeded the capabilities of any individual species. Marcus, Elena said as she recorded, what they've accomplished here changes everything we understand about the potential for intelligence in the galaxy. This isn't just cooperation between species. It's evolution beyond the species level entirely. That's exactly what it is, Marcus agreed. And they're offering to share it with everyone. No species excluded, no capabilities withheld, no advantages reserved for any particular group. They want to create a galactic collective intelligence that includes every form of conscious life. Elena paused her recording and looked around the chamber again. Representatives from dozens of species were working on projects that would benefit all participants. There was no competition, no territorial conflict, no resource guarding. Just collaborative intelligence directed toward mutual advancement. How did you make this happen? Elena asked. How did you bridge not just communication barriers, but fundamental differences in how these species think and perceive reality? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the collaborative work session continue around them. I didn't make it happen, he said finally. I just provided the initial conditions that allowed it to emerge naturally. Once species realized they could trust each other, once they understood that cooperation created more benefits than competition, once they discovered that their differences were strengths rather than obstacles, the collective intelligence developed on its own. But surely your role was crucial. Without a translator, without someone who could communicate with all 50 species. Was necessary in the beginning, Marcus agreed. But, look around, Elena. Do you see them using me as a translator anymore? Elena realized that Marcus was right. The species in the chamber were communicating directly with each other through their technological interfaces and environmental adaptations. They had learned each other's languages and developed new forms of communication that transcended the barriers between their different sensory modalities. They don't need me to translate anymore, Marcus said. They've moved beyond that. Now my role is more like a facilitator. Someone who helps identify new opportunities for collaboration, who mediates when different approaches to problem-solving create confusion, who ensures that no species is left behind as the collective intelligence continues to evolve. Elena documented several more hours of the collaborative work session, but she found herself struggling to fully comprehend what she was witnessing. The projects the mixed species teams were developing would advance galactic civilization by thousands of years in just decades. The scientific breakthroughs, technological innovations, and philosophical insights emerging from their collaboration were revolutionary. As they prepared to leave the universal habitat, Elena realized that her mission had fundamentally changed. She had come to document an unusual success in interspecies management. Instead, she had discovered the birth of a new form of civilization that could reshape the future of intelligence throughout the galaxy. Marcus, she said as they walked back toward the transport, this can't stay contained to one research station. The implications are too significant. This needs to be shared with the entire galactic community. Marcus smiled. I'm glad you understand that, Elena. Because that's exactly what they're planning to do. And they want humanity to help them make it happen. Elena's final day at Station Kepler 442b began with an urgent message from the Galactic Research Council. News of her preliminary reports had reached Earth and several other core worlds, creating a storm of excitement and concern among the galactic scientific community. Emergency sessions were being called. Military advisors were asking questions about security implications. Philosophers were debating the meaning of consciousness itself. Dr. Vasquez, came the voice of Director Harrison from Earth Command, we need immediate clarification on your reports. Are you seriously claiming that 50 alien species have formed some kind of collective intelligence? And that this Marcus Chen character has somehow orchestrated the entire thing? Elena stood in the communication chamber aboard the orbital station, looking down at the planet where the most significant development in galactic history was unfolding below. Director Harrison, she replied carefully, what I'm reporting isn't orchestration. It's facilitation of something that was always possible but never attempted. And the implications extend far beyond what any of us initially imagined. Through the viewports, Elena could see new construction occurring across the planet's surface. The 50 species had begun expanding their universal habitat, creating additional facilities that could accommodate even more diverse forms of life. They were preparing for something big. We're dispatching a full diplomatic and scientific fleet to your location, Director Harrison continued. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Until then, you are to maintain strict observation protocols and avoid any actions that might compromise the situation. Elena ended the communication and made her way to the transport bay where Marcus was waiting. His expression was serious, but not concerned. If anything, he seemed more focused than she had seen him before. The collective intelligence wants to speak with you directly today, Marcus said as they descended to the planet's surface. All 50 species, simultaneously. They have something they want you to take back to the galactic community. Marcus, I need to tell you that a full fleet is coming. The Galactic Council is treating this as a potential first contact situation of unprecedented significance. There are going to be diplomats, military advisors, security teams. I know, Marcus replied calmly. They told me. The collective intelligence has been monitoring galactic communications for the past week. They're aware of the response their invitation has generated. Elena stared at him. Their invitation? Your reports weren't the first communication the galactic community received about what's happening here. 3 days ago, the collective transmitted a formal message to every government, research institution, and military organization in known space. They introduced themselves and extended an open invitation for any species to join their collaborative network. The transport touched down at the assembly ground, but Elena could see that it had been significantly expanded. The circular clearing was now surrounded by sophisticated communication arrays and what appeared to be transportation platforms. The entire facility had been transformed into something that could accommodate large numbers of visitors from across the galaxy. They built all of this in 3 days? Elena asked in amazement. When 50 species work together with their full technological capabilities, construction timelines become meaningless, Marcus explained. They can manipulate matter at the molecular level, bend spacetime to optimize resource transportation, and coordinate complex projects through quantum-entangled communication networks. What would take human engineers years to design and build, they completed in hours. As they approached the central communication platform, Elena realized that this wasn't just an expansion of the assembly ground. It was a complete transformation into something that could serve as a galactic meeting place. The platform itself was large enough to accommodate hundreds of different species simultaneously, with environmental zones that could adapt to any known form of life. Dr. Vasquez, Marcus said as they reached the platform, "What you're about to experience is unique in galactic history. You'll be the first individual to communicate directly with a true multi-species collective intelligence. Are you ready?" Elena activated her recording equipment and nodded. Immediately, all 50 enclosures around the assembly ground came alive with activity. But, this time, instead of individual species communicating through Marcus as a translator, they began generating a coordinated response that Elena could understand directly. The communication came through multiple sensory channels simultaneously. Light patterns from the crystallines formed words in her field of vision. Sound waves from various species created spoken language she could comprehend. Chemical signals somehow reached her consciousness as complex thoughts and concepts. Electromagnetic fields generated directly in her brain as coherent ideas. "Greetings, Elena Vasquez of humanity," the collective voice said through all 50 communication methods at once. "We speak to you as one mind composed of 50 perspectives, 50 ways of understanding reality, 50 approaches to solving the challenges that face all conscious beings in this galaxy." Elena found herself responding verbally, but somehow understood that her words were being received by all 50 species in their preferred communication methods. This is incredible. How are you making direct communication possible?" "We have learned to bridge the gaps between different forms of consciousness," the collective replied. "What your species calls translation, we have evolved beyond. We share understanding itself, not just information. Through our collaboration, we have developed the ability to communicate with any form of intelligence, regardless of its biological or technological basis." The communication was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. She wasn't just hearing or seeing the collective's words, she was understanding their meaning directly, along with the emotional and conceptual context that accompanied each idea. She could sense the different perspectives of various species contributing to each thought, creating a richness of understanding that no single species communication could achieve. "We know that our invitation has created concern among the governments and institutions of your galactic community," the collective continued. "Many fear that what we offer represents a threat to individual species' autonomy or cultural identity. We want you to understand that this fear is based on misconceptions about our nature and our goals." Elena felt herself being guided to a deeper level of communication, where she could perceive the collective's thoughts more directly. She experienced their perspective on consciousness, intelligence, and cooperation in a way that no written report could convey. "We do not seek to eliminate individual identity," the collective explained. "We celebrate the unique perspectives that each species brings to our shared understanding. The crystallines remain crystallines, with their own culture, their own values, their own ways of experiencing existence. But they have also become more than they were alone, through their connection to our collective awareness." Elena realized she was experiencing something unprecedented, not just communication with alien intelligence, but communion with a form of consciousness that transcended the limitations of individual species. She could sense the distinct personalities and perspectives of each species within the collective, while also understanding how they combine to create something greater. Your role, Elena Vasquez, is to help others understand that what we offer is not absorption or assimilation, but collaboration and mutual enhancement, the collective said. Each species that joins our network retains its independence while gaining access to capabilities and perspectives it could never achieve alone. Through her enhanced communication with the collective, Elena experienced examples of what they meant. She felt the sensation of perceiving electromagnetic spectra as the crystallines did, understanding molecular composition through thermal analysis like the Vorthack, experiencing spatial dimensions as the ethereals perceived them. But she remained fundamentally human throughout the experience. The fleet that approaches will arrive with military escorts and security protocols, the collective observed. They fear that we represent a threat to the existing order of galactic civilization. We want you to help them understand that we represent its evolution. Elena found herself asking questions that came directly from her consciousness, without the need for verbal formulation. What do you want from the galactic community? What are you really offering? The answer came as a flood of understanding that encompassed technological, philosophical, and practical concepts simultaneously. She experienced visions of galactic civilization as it could become species working together to solve problems that no individual culture could address alone. Diseases that affected multiple species being cured through collaborative research. Technological breakthroughs that emerged from combining different approaches to understanding reality. Conflicts between species being resolved through shared understanding rather than military force. We offer partnership in the truest sense, the collective explained. Not dominance, not submission, but genuine cooperation between equals who recognize that their differences are strengths to be shared rather than barriers to be overcome. Elena experienced more specific examples. Environmental restoration projects that use techniques from dozens of different species to repair damaged worlds. Exploration missions that could survive in any environment because they incorporated survival methods from all known forms of life. Research collaborations that solved fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself through the combined insights of multiple perspectives on existence. The question for your species, and for all species in this galaxy, is whether you are ready to move beyond the limitations of individual development, the collective said. Whether you are prepared to embrace a form of civilization that celebrates diversity while creating unity. Elena realized that her experience of communicating with the collective was being recorded not just by her equipment, but in her own consciousness in a way that would allow her to share the experience directly with others. The collective had given her the ability to transmit understanding itself, not just information about their offer. There will be those who fear what we represent, the collective acknowledged. Those who believe that cooperation diminishes individual achievement, that sharing capabilities weakens species autonomy, that collective intelligence threatens personal identity. These fears are natural, but they are based on assumptions about the nature of consciousness that our existence proves to be false. Elena experienced the collective's perspective on individual identity within shared consciousness. She understood that each species maintained its unique characteristics and cultural values while gaining access to capabilities and perspectives that enhanced rather than replaced their original nature. Your species has a choice to make, Elena Vasquez, the collective said. You can approach our offer with fear, seeking to control or contain what we represent. Or you can approach with curiosity and hope, recognizing the potential for advancement that we offer to all conscious beings. As the communication session continued, Elena learned about the collective's long-term vision for galactic civilization. They had already made contact with other species beyond the original 50, sharing their collaborative technologies and inviting participation in their network. The response had been overwhelmingly positive from species that were willing to move beyond traditional concepts of competition and dominance. The fleet that approaches will carry representatives who seek to evaluate our threat potential, the collective observed. We invite them to evaluate our collaboration potential instead. We want to demonstrate through direct experience what we offer, not just describe it through traditional diplomatic channels. Elena realized that the collective was preparing to offer the incoming fleet the same kind of direct communication experience she was having. They would be able to understand the collective's nature and intentions through shared consciousness rather than through potentially misleading verbal or written descriptions. Your role, Elena Vasquez, will be crucial in helping the fleet's representatives understand that what they experience is an opportunity, not a danger, the collective explained. You have experienced our nature directly. You understand that we enhance rather than eliminate individual identity. You can help others overcome their initial fear and recognize the potential we represent. As the communication session concluded, Elena realized that she had been fundamentally changed by the experience. Not in her basic nature or identity, but in her understanding of what consciousness could become when freed from the limitations of individual species development. Dr. Vasquez, Marcus said as the collective communication ended, the fleet will arrive tomorrow. The collective intelligence wants you to serve as liaison during the first contact protocols. Will you help them understand what they're really encountering here? Elena looked around the assembly ground, where 50 different species were visible at their observation points. But now she understood that what she was seeing was just the visible portion of something much larger, a new form of civilization that could include every conscious being in the galaxy. Marcus, she said, what we've witnessed here isn't just a success in interspecies cooperation. It's the beginning of a new phase of galactic evolution. And, yes, I'll help them understand that humanity has the opportunity to be part of something unprecedented in the history of consciousness itself. As they prepared to return to the orbital station, Elena realized that her mission had evolved far beyond documentation. She had become humanity's first representative in a new form of civilization that could reshape the future of intelligence throughout the galaxy. The question now was whether the approaching fleet would see an opportunity or a threat, and whether humanity was ready to evolve beyond the limitations of single-species consciousness. Tomorrow would determine the future of galactic civilization itself.